So, I wanted to talk about Sun teams in NU a bit today, because ever since about mid to late January, they've been pretty common in the tier. And then we had a little ban, happen with Hisuian Lilligant. And yeah, then we had another vote on Drought, and I feel like some people may have been a little bit confused by that, because it's like, wait, why is Sun still getting looked at? I thought this was the broken one. So I wanted to talk about it today, go through Sun teams in NU, and just give like a basic idea of how we talk about them and how you can build your own. So I've divided this up into like supportive Pokemon and then just like your options for offensive Pokemon, because I think Sun's pretty easy to break up into that manner. It makes it easier to discuss. So let's get into it. Of course, before I start the video too in depth, I do want to give a little reminder, man. We're getting close to 7K subscribers, so if you are not yet subscribed, definitely go down there and click that button. Helps a lot. I will appreciate you forever. I think it's a pretty good trade-off. You got uploads every day too. I mean, come on. So to start off, I broke it up into the supportive ones first. And this is like my own take, of course, on Sun. There's going to be mons I left off here that you can definitely run on Sun, but I'm trying to keep it condensed down to what I've like actually seen in sort of recent history so that we can keep the list from getting too exhaustive. So if we're talking mandatory Pokemon for Sun, there's really only like one truly mandatory Pokemon. There's going to be others that you're hard pressed to not run. But Ninetales is the only mon that you need to run. And of course, it's because you get Auto Sun. And that is huge. You don't have to waste turns trying to set Sunny Day with like a Klefki or a Sableye, for example. You get Auto Sun. You also get Healing Wish. And this is one of the biggest boons to Sun teams as well, Ninetales finally having access to Healing Wish, because you end up being able to support a lot of just stupid strong wall breakers, particularly HP reliant ones. So if we're looking down here, just to mention it real quick, Charizard and Typhlosion being like the two foremost examples of this, because Zard has solar power constantly chipping away at it. Typhlosion wants to spam out eruptions, that's how it's going to do its cleaning. And so being able to support those mons, even give them a little bit more presence in the case of Typhlosion in the early game, I think is very, 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 very impactful for these teams. Even though supporting something like, say, Brute Bonnet or Vileplume, I guess even Victreebel to a lesser extent, but like Brute Bonnet and Plume, just given that they have a little bit more defensive utility maybe than some other Pokemon you'd find on this team style, I think it's kind of cool to be able to enable them to maybe leverage it a bit. It's not like you're getting a ton out of it, of course, but you are getting at least some minor amping up of their threat level. And again, this kind of plays into them having a bit more early game threat while they get carried to late game, particularly to like Vileplume. I would say that's relevant too, since Plume is so strong under Sun. I mean, it's 110 special attack, but it's not like the highest, but you give it that life orb, you get a growth boost. Plume can start wall breaking for itself a little bit early on, and then you can just bring it back late game and it just demon hours. So Ninetales it's a being group for that. And then I'm going to talk about Espeon and Tatsugiri next, because these are your two options for hazard control on Sun teams. We generally are seeing Espeon because Espeon has eject button and magic bounce. So you'd run, a lot of time I think you just go bulky on Espeon because you don't really need it to do damage. But you can run a set like this where you get Psychic, you get Weather Ball, you get Alluring Voice. Maybe throw in Morning Sun as well, just so you have some extra staying power. And you're able to pivot this mon in pretty effectively into some of the more passive hazard setters. I think Registeel in particular here, because Espeon's going to be able to switch into it the entire game. And there's really not a ton that Registeel does that you're worried about, especially when you run bulkier. I think it is still tempting to go offensive, and I don't even flack anyone for going offensive on Espeon, because I think either's good. But because Espeon is kind of fragile, I prefer to have the extra bulk, because heavy slams do kind of build up in damage pretty quickly over time. And if Registeel's running something like Curse, it get a little bit scary maybe if it's got the right Terra type. So I like this for that. Otherwise though, I mean, Mudsdale's another mon that just gives you a little bit more leverage around. You can even think about like Scarf Flygon, where you've got eject buttons. So one, if they try to set up rocks, well, you bounce it back. Two, if they try to U-turn, you get the pivot instead. And if they lock into U-turn, I mean, that's a free Zard that's a free type. You know, it's a lot of mods that you don't really want to let in for free, which is pretty cool. The other option is Tatsu MIDI. And the nice thing about Tatsu is, of course, one, you have rapid spin, so you're not contingent on switching in and blocking the hazard. But instead, you've got, as well, Draco Meteor Eject Pack, which gives you a little bit more control over how you pivot. So those are two pretty clear benefits to Espeon. I think the big spot where Espeon outclasses Tatsu is just recognizing that Sun is usually being played very offensively, and as a result, it's kind of nice to have that immediate pivot, even if, like, we've seen me use Sun teams and had eject button absolutely screw me over multiple times, but it still ends up, I feel, being more worth it than not, right? So Tatsu struggles do end up just being, one, it's a water type that you're using on Sun, so you kind of lose a lot of your access to Surf being a good move, but you can still run Nasty Plot, so you still get the boost. And like we said, the big benefit to this is just having Rapid Spin, which, okay, my opponent gets hazards up at some point earlier in the game. Okay, it doesn't matter. At the very least, I can threaten a spin later, which is very nice. Also, Storm Drain's kind of cool, just so you always have the water immunity, especially if you run into something like Rain. Now, obviously, you have an advantage. Rain is forced into being a manual weather in Inu, because, well, we don't have Politoed around, we banned it. I think it also rose to RU. That's a thing still in the tier, and I think it is nice, even though Sun's going to have typically an advantage, just to be able to be immune entirely to water type attacks, which, I mean, yeah, it's the Sun, you got a lot of fire types. And then the last one I wanted to mention is just Stealth Rock Flygon. This could be Choice Scarf, this could be Lefties, either really is fine. I do like Scarf Flygon on these teams because it gives you some speed control outside of the weather that's not as contingent on weather for damage. So you think about, like, the abusers for Sun, Typhlosion is typically going to be Scarf because you just want to be faster than everything so that you could spam eruptions and that you're most likely firing off an eruption at max power. But Flygon gives you something that's maybe a little bit more consistent and, of course, less reliant on being supported so effectively. I mean, with Flygon, you just kind of you throw it on the team and you're good. Nice thing too is otherwise Sun doesn't really have a lot of good options for having a Volt Switch blocker or just a check to electric types in general. So Scarf Flygon, or again, like we talked about, bulky Flygon with leftovers. We're talking like maybe max HP, max speed type of bulky Flygon. If you think back to the Serena video that I did, where I talked about how, like, yeah, you could have like those really defensive Serenas. You could have some that just go max HP, max speed, so that you get a bit of a blend of offensive and defensive sets. I think a Flygon is nice to still have the speed as well if you go bulky. And frankly, I feel that way as well because without Roost, I don't really think you get as much out of dedicating entirely to defensive sets. So I prefer to still have a little bit of more utility in revenge killing just through being maybe a little faster. But yeah, it's cool too. Like, this is probably your best check if you're looking at Pokemon like Thundurus. So there's that. Also, Toxtricity kind of runs you down otherwise, which is why I think Scarf is so nice. Scarf is still outsped by Shift Gear Toxtricity, mind you, but otherwise, hey man, they got a Shift Gear. I mean, otherwise even Scarf Toxtricity could run you down. And yeah, we don't support that in this household. Yeah, and now we're gonna get to the Sun Abusers, and I kind of, so I broke it out into the fire types. And then I broke it down into the grass types, and I also sort of listed it in order of, like, how common they are. It's sort of loose in, you know, some regards, but generally, I think we did a effective job. So, like, the first one, right? Specs Typhlosion, not Specs Typhlosion, Specs Charizard. Well, if I wanted to, like, tell you why to use this, this is probably the best way of doing it. So we're going to open up the calc. And we're going to say there's a Charizard in this game. Are you Solar Power? And sure, Flygon, you know, nice resistance. People like using Flygon as a resist to fire type moves. And so I set the Sun, and Flygon has died. It is gone. There is no more Flygon. We canceled him. The woke mob got to Flygon. That's really unfortunate. Dragalge, you know, Dragalge, real good Pokemon, nice and bulky. And then we set the Sun. Oh no, the dimensions, no! They're getting me too. And we set the sun, and Trigalgy is getting it's getting two-shot by flamethrower. It should be Weather Ball, but I don't know why the calc doesn't default to Weather Ball. Maybe the set's too old. So there you go. It gets two-shot by Weather Ball on the Switch. Good work, guys. No, but it's okay. Surely, trying to think of a mon to even showcase real quick for calcs. I'd show Goodra, but nobody uses that doo-doo mon. Oh no, you want to see a funny one? Tatsugiri, I'm running my own Sun team, and I need a counter to other Sun teams. Surely this will not go terribly. Oh, what's that? I'm one-shot by Focus Blast? Or Solar Beam? Wow. Incredible. So yeah. Oh, and I didn't even showcase what happens when we press the funny Terra Fire button. Yeah. In fact, I'm curious to see this. There's a max HP Dragalge with Terra Fire clicked. Ah, there we go. That's the calc I was looking for. Nice one-shot. Nice one-shot. Yeah, Dragalge's supposed to be bulky. I know this isn't like a truly defensive set, of course, but I mean, come on, let's throw a 124 there and make it calm then, sure. It's still a roll, and if Stealth Rock are up, it's a very, very favorable roll. So, if you needed reasons to use Charizard, there you go. I'm not even elaborating anymore, man. And next up's Typh. And Typh is really just here because Typhlosion is the best cleaner available to Sun. You don't have to take turns boosting. You could throw Scarf on there, so even if Sun expires, you're still pretty darn fast. And Eruption is really, really hard to switch into. Of course, the calcs with Typh aren't as juicy as with Charizard, but you still get some very similar looking angles. So, like, for example... Okay, I don't know how to spell Typhlosion, guys. God help me. Any choice item. I want a Scarf, please. I want to look fashionable. And then we throw up the Sun and say Terra Fire. So as you can see, it's not nearly as impressive, but it's still a two-shot with Stealth Rock up here. You can go to Flagon as well, something here, like maybe Flagon's trying to switch in on you. Eruption does 500,000. And come on, this is like Scarf Typhlosion. You could be Specs if you wanted. And you're going to get some similarly stupid calcs. I just think it's a lot nicer with how reliant you are on staying at max HP for Eruption to, you know, really threaten to clean through teams without much work needed. Scarf gives you that extra insurance because you're not worried, like, oh, what if the random wall, not even wall, but like, what if I am forced to take a hit before I could attack and then I can't even kill what's in front of me? So you go Scarf just to make that less problematic. And yeah, you don't really need damage. Or not damage, you don't really need, extra, yeah, you don't need extra power. And now we got, I'll move Chandelure up here just to talk about it real quick. Chandelure's like an alternative to Zard, typically is how I see it. Because it's still stupidly strong. Like, if we go to a Specs Chandelure under Sun, right? Flamethrower, this isn't even Fire Blast, this is a Flamethrower. To Flagon is still doing an insane amount. The benefits to Chandelure are mostly that you're a little bit more useful defensively. Ghost is just really nice. And you have Flash Fire too, so two things are really nice. And you also have, what's it called, less of a Stealth Rock weakness. So a little bit less reliant on support. You're not super weak to hazards. You also don't have that solar power ticking away at you. Trick is also pretty cool, so I'd say see, here's the funny thing. I'd say Trick helps your defensive teams matchup. The thing is, Charizard blows them up anyway, so it doesn't really matter. I mean, the difference between Shandy and Zard is that P2 is more of an issue for Shandy, of course. But you still have Trick. So it's like, yeah, do I really care that much? Maybe not. And it is really nice, though. Something like if you're running an Iron Press Registeel, obviously Zard is going to beat that boy up under Sun anyway. Like, it's going to take too much from an overheat. But it is nice just in case that you have something that always shuts it down. And we can look at a couple physical attackers that are fire types. Arcanine is here because Terra normal E-Speed. So you still run Flash Fire because it is... Frankly, I do think Flash Fire has a lot of value on this type of team, where you don't want to get run down by opposing fire types, because of course you support them too when you get your Sun up. And you can run like Howl sets, and so Howl, Extreme Speed, Flare Blitz stuff is pretty decent. You can also drop Howl entirely into like Iron Head, and this works pretty nicely as just a standalone breaker of sorts, where Flare Blitz, of course, amped up a ton under Sun, and it's nice for support. One, because priority, but more importantly, Iron Head. You're trying to get rid of Diancie. Diancie is, it's not like it's impossible to get through, but Typhlosion, if you've got that in the back as your Scarfer, it is going to struggle a bit versus Diancie. So having a nice lure for it, it can go a lot. Or, not, it can go a lot. It can go a long way. And then, of course, Pouty and Tauros. Mon, we haven't really seen in a while, but I thought I'd mention it here anyway. It's definitely an option, but it's kind of like how Embor is an option, right? I'm mostly including this here because we used to use it on Sun. But, I think the benefit mostly to this is, unlike a lot of the other fire types you have access to, it's not nearly as weak to entry hazards. So it might require a little less support, and you could maybe get away without needing Espeon or Tatsugiri. But even then, you're probably going to have enough other ones of those abusers that need the support, so... you know. But it is nice, and it also gives you a lot of the same support that Arcanine does, where it's still drawing in Diancie very, very consistently. And so you're going to get chip on it, and you're going to help your Typhlosion clean late game. And then we get to the grass types here. And of course, Brute Bonnet's a very obvious partner here. And of course, one of the big reasons Brute Bonnet is so good on these Sun teams is Photosynthesis. You don't even have to boost to get your damage, which is incredible. But if you want to boost, you have growth. So that's great. And its Sucker Punch is always good for extra priority on these types of teams. You know, again, we talk about with one of the earlier mons, Flygon, how you want to still have some speed outside the weather, and so Sucker Punch is really, really useful for that. You're able to get a growth boost off. It won't matter that your Photosynthesis goes away because you still have the damage. And then you can run like Bullet Seed as well with loaded dice. You can get close combat, so you've got good coverage against steals. I've also seen some people running Stomping Tantrum on the Brute, because you've got Sucker Punch, which can actually give you that last move failed boost. So if I Sucker Punch and someone switches maybe into like a Glowbro, well, I can go for Tantrum in the next turn, and it'll do even more. And this ends up being a little bit better for your overall coverage anyway, because Bullet Seed is so strong with loaded dice, potential boosts. You kind of always just want Sucker Punch because Brute Bonnet is pretty slow, so you don't want to drop that. You could go a 4 attack set. I think if you go 4 attacks with Crunch instead of Growth, then you could see a lot more justification for CC here. Because, well, I'll just crunch the Glowbro. I'll crunch the Glowbro, it'll do far more than Tantrum would. And then I have CC, which is just stronger for the steals. The nice thing, though, too, about Stomping Tantrum is it does give you specialized coverage for Klefki. Which, I mean, that otherwise is kind of a hard mon to beat down. So, there's a lot of reasons to like it. And in Vileplume, I want to mention here, too, because it does have Weather Ball. So, you just run, like, the most standard set imaginable here. There's really not a lot to talk about with Plume. The main thing to address is the Victreebel comp, because they're very, very similar Pokemon. The main niche that Victreebel has over Vileplume is that with a timid nature, you are able to outspeed the base 100 speed Scarfers under Sun. The main reason I don't think that matters a ton, though, is what are the base 100 speed Scarfers? It's Tauros, and it's Flygon. And neither of those really are threatening Plume anyway without a decent amount of prior chip. So the nice thing is that Plume is just stronger anyway and bulkier too. It's going to be able to do a lot of the same of Victreebel with a little bit more offensive counterplay, but that offensive counterplay isn't really even that substantial. So, I mean, if you really want to have some insurance against those, it's fine to use Victory, but I think that's really why Victreebel sees so little usage now on Sun. Plume's just a bit better. And one of the other things, too, is we look at Sun. Is it really even that big a deal that you're outsped by those mons? Because a lot of the time, like we talked about earlier with Flygon U-turning on eject button Espeon, typically there's pretty good ways to exploit the choice locking of these attackers. Here's not like Meloetta. Like Meloetta is also another Scarfer that you'd worry about that outspeeds Plume that Victreebel gets the jump on. If Meloetta comes out versus, if it even gets the lock into Psychic and kill me, that is just a free Brute Bonnet switch in. That is a free growth, and from there, my opponent has to figure out how to outplay me. And I can even Terra Dark for stronger Sucker Punches against, like, whatever random offensive counterplay maybe they have. If they go back to Meloetta later, I can Terra Dark. Well, Terra Dark I would never do, but I could Bullet Seed, maybe if they're even just looking for a trick, for example. No, the Terra Dark point is relevant for the, if they go for, like, U-turn. There you go, take a little bit less chip. Nice mid-ground, you, instead of Sucker Punching, you Terra Dark Bullet Seed, so you cover both grounds, look at that. But yeah, the main point here is I don't think I'd use Victory Bell too much anymore, because Plume, it's stronger, it's bulkier. I don't really care if the mons that Victory Bell can outspeed are in the game, because either Vileplume isn't that threatened by them, or I have ways around them. Like, I will simply take advantage of them with my other Pokemon. And then the last mon is a Lilligant, because it has... We banned Hisuian Lilligant, but don't you worry, there's still another. The main thing here is you still have access to Quiver Dance, which is pretty cool. And Weather Ball, regular Lilligant, is actually, like, really annoying to deal with. Something that needs to be kept in mind, this one is really damn strong. So you can get something like this going on. I'd say run Sleep Powder, but of course that move isn't allowed in the tier. What move do we run last now? Probably Alluring Voice for coverage. But you can have something like this, and this is actually quite hard to deal with defensively. You've got, like, Dragalge. There's not really a lot else, though, that takes it on too well. Something like Chandelure, I guess, another. Dragalge, Chandelure, those are two of probably the best mons to answer it, but those aren't on every team. Salazzle, kind of like the same deal. It's not on a lot of teams anyway. So, it works pretty well. Not a mon that I love, but it's an option. So yeah, I hope y'all enjoyed this little video on showcasing Sun. I think Sun teams are still rather strong. Very, very fun brand of offense to use as well. As a Gen 5, like, I don't want to say mainer, because I don't play Gen 5 tiers really much anymore. But I came into competitive Pokemon when Gen 5 was the current tier, which feels like I'm outdating myself quite a lot. Or not outdating, I'm just dating myself, because that was 2011. It's 2024. Been playing comp mons, I think, at this point for over half my life. So that's something. But it's always fun to use weather teams, because I've got that little attachment to Gen 5 where literally it was the weather gen. Thanks y'all for watching, though. I'll catch you next time. Peace.